Hello, everybody. So today I want to talk about pharmacy strikes. It's likely, based on what I read on the news, that there will be pharmacy strikes, right, following the UAW auto workers strike. And it's funny that pharmacies could strike and could be in the crosshairs of a revolution like e-commerce and digitalization, especially this late in the game. But they are, right? It makes absolute sense for me that the 45,000 retail pharmacies that we have in the US would be impacted by digitalization and e-commerce, just like any other firm, right? And so this is the question I ask, right? Do any type of retailer, right, non-experiential retailers, are they not impacted by e-commerce in the 5-hour free shipping era that Amazon has imposed on us, right? What about the branches for banks, for consumer banks? What is their reason for existing in a cashless and digital banking era, right? What's the reason for dealerships to exist when people prefer to do research for their cars and buy their cars online? And then I ask, what's the reason for 45,000 pharmacies to exist in the era of automated warehouses and same-day shipping? And if you go through Amazon, for example, 5-hour free shipping, right? On most stuff in my area, Amazon's going to be 5 hours free shipping, right? Do we need to maintain 45,000 pharmacies, the buildings, the staff, the electricity, the insurance, right? The risks of theft? Do we need all of this when you can just have automated warehouses, sprinkled across America that ship the products, right? And this is why, if you look at the stock price, these stocks haven't been doing well, right? Walgreens in the past 5 years has lost 70% of its value. And then Hims 5 years ago was essentially nothing, right? It didn't exist. It was a startup, a 1-year-old startup. And today it is more than $1 billion company, but the same can be said about Amazon's initiative or Cost Plus Drug, which is Mark Cuban's e-pharmacy, digital pharmacy. There's many more digital pharmacies. I'm just going to use those two as an example along with Hims. Hims being a more specialized e-pharmacy. Hims is an e-pharmacy that comes with an e-doctor as well, and it's all in one. So what's going on with the pharmacies? Why do the pharmacists want to strike? Why do the pharmacy staff want to strike? And let me say that I understand why they want to strike, because it seems like a pretty stressful job. Even though I don't believe in strikes, I usually believe if you don't like your job, you should just quit your job and go get another job elsewhere. But nonetheless, I mean, there's reasons to say why the pharmacy staff, and perhaps to a lesser extent the pharmacist job, are both top job, right? So you have to fill and verify prescriptions, oftentimes by hand, right? Oftentimes this is not done like a distributed automated warehouse would do it through computer. Sometimes they have to do it by hand. You have to do this with patient phone calls, juggle with phone calls. How many times you reach a pharmacist and they spend their time on the phone talking with patients? Is my prescription there, right? They have to deal with insurance companies and copay issues. This is something that Hims has entirely eliminated out of the equation. But this is something that probably frustrates and slows down pharmacists quite a bit, right? Because the patient may not get the product if they don't see that their insurance has been applied to the drug. They may not even get the drug. So there's a lot of administrative work going into place. And this is something that is a new demand for them, that has been newly placed on them or newly emphasized, right? It's the doubling down on vaccines and the administration on vaccines. So a lot of pharmacists or pharmacy staff now have to provide vaccines, administer vaccines, and that's new work that they didn't used to have. And perhaps something that they also didn't used to have as much, but directly linked to the juggling of the phone calls and filling the prescriptions and dealing with issues with insurance, is the fact that they have to deal with more and more patient frustration and even anger. And I was reading stuff about some pharmacies having to ban patients because they got mad or angry at the pharmacy staff. These are significant issues, and on top of that, they overall complain for a push for profits from these pharmacy chains. And this, I have to understand the manager of the pharmacy. When you pay for a physical building, when you're in a struggling sector where there's competition everywhere and you pay for a struggling building, you're going to put undue pressure on your pharmacist to go for these profits. These are legitimate concerns, in my view, and even though I have a blanket view against strikes, I don't believe in strikes, but I do believe that these concerns are perhaps just a tad more legitimate than the UAW complaining about a 5-day work week and wanting a 4-day work week. I think this is a little silly, a little less legitimate than this. I mean, especially things like dealing with anger and frustration from patients. Anyways, but here's the problem. Most of these concerns can be addressed by digital pharmacies, which is where we are headed. I have no doubt we are headed to the world of digital pharmacies. Let me go point by point, right? So what about filling prescriptions, verifying prescriptions, and also dealing with patient phone calls? Well, if you follow HIMSS, you know that they have 2 fully automated warehouses that deal with the fulfillment of the different drugs and prescriptions that they sell. And attached to the one in Columbus, they also have a call center, a customer service center that is attached to it that handles with the patient phone calls. So you centralize everything, right? You centralize the warehouse, the prescription, the filling of a prescription by machines in a giant warehouse, and also you have call center specialists, customer service specialists that specialize in dealing with patient concerns all day. So this is addressed by the economies of scale that digitalization place on us and give us, right? Digitalization allows us, automation allows us to deal with those issues in a centralized, much more efficient way. Now, what about having to deal with insurance companies and work with co-pays? Well, in general, I will say that this is something where a modern enterprise with modern IT can greatly help with that. And I think a lot of the issues that, say, a Walgreens or a CVS or your local grocery store may have with insurance companies and dealing with insurance companies is that their IT has not been updated in a while or is perhaps built on old IT rails. Oftentimes companies, they will operate on IT systems that are from the 60s and the 70s, and this is why it leads to a very, very complicated processes that can be greatly improved by companies that have fresh new IT. And that's why oftentimes a lot of these startups, a lot of these new players will do much better because they start fresh on fresh IT rails using modern code that allows you to streamline and really benefit the customer and benefit the connection between the insurance companies and your company. Furthermore, you have companies like HIMSS that have entirely eliminated that part of the process and just decide to charge very little for the drugs. And they charge so little for these drugs, in fact, that people don't even feel compelled to use their insurance because it's pointless, because the copay would be higher than just buying the drug outright, the generic drug, buying it outright from the provider such as HIMSS. So that's what they do. Then there's other things, like the new demands to administrate vaccines. Well, this is where retail shines, and this is where retail is still going to shine. I mean, it is true that unlike a lot of e-commerce, for example, there's always going to be procedures in the medical fields that need to happen in person. Like, this is entirely true. And of course, when we look about medical office buildings and doctors' procedures, I listened to the HIMSS conference call many times, and, it's clear that there's going to be that 20 to 30% of interventions that are going to require a physical presence, because yes, you have to be in person if you say administer a vaccine, right? You have to see the patient. But the question that I have is, does this justify 45,000 pharmacies, right? You may be able to get away with 5,000 pharmacies where the pharmacist exclusively, or the medical provider exclusively, does the visits that require you to be in person, right? You don't need 45,000 pharmacy for the occasional person that needs in-person intervention, if that makes some sense, right? Just like you don't need tens of thousands of consumer branches for the occasional cash deposit or for the occasional customer that doesn't have technology or doesn't have a smartphone, right? It doesn't justify paying for all of this infrastructure for edge cases, right? Or, I mean, in the case of course, a CVS or Walgreens, it's a little more than an edge case, but it's not the main business. And so then I ask the question, do you need to pay for all of these retail locations for something that is not so core to the business and that is not the main business? And of course, CVS and Walgreens realize that. That's why they've tried to make it the main business. They've tried to increase these demands to kind of shift the business, because of course the whole debate, does strategy follow structure or does structure follow strategy, right? And in their case, they have a structure. They can't shut the stores down, and so they're finding a way to justify these stores. But I don't have any problem thinking doctors in medical office buildings could handle vaccinations, or registered nurses. Anyways, I don't think the need for vaccines, say, I don't think that need justifies 45,000 pharmacy. And how about dealing with patient anger and frustration? Well, hopefully this can be avoided in an online process, right? Hopefully you can make the online process so easy and so streamlined that you don't have anger from your patient. But if you do, of course, it's a much better situation to be 1,000 miles away on the phone than to be face to face with someone who is angry. And this is where I believe digital commerce, by its very nature, shines. By its very nature, shines, and you can make the same argument for, say, theft. If you're an online website, theft is not as big of an issue. You don't have to deal with these confrontation of thefts, for example, when you sell something online. And this is something that any physical store, by its very nature, is always going to have to deal with. So this is yet again another situation where if you're digitalized, if you're online, you're going to be better. And the last complaint is, of course, the push for profits. And this push for profits is well understood, because you have to pay for this very expensive physical locations. All of these locations have to be paid for. That's why there is this general desire for profits. We see the same thing in banks. When consumer banks have to pay for, say, in the case of Bank of America, 7,000 branches, when you have to pay for those, we see why the banks push for profits. But when you are largely online, you can share the savings of those profits. You can share it with a consumer. And you can win in the marketplace by sharing those profits with the consumer and by not being as profit-seeking, because you don't have the same expense structure. So this is the last point I'll make about this. And could retail pharmacy strikes benefit HIMSS and other online players? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, as you would have expected, right? This is obvious that this is where online sellers of prescriptions and drugs, online sellers of drugs, are going to greatly benefit. If this is the same as legacy auto, if they strike and legacy auto continues and they run out of cars, it will benefit autos that do not run out of cars, like Tesla, right? That will benefit them. And legacy pharmacy is the same thing. If your local pharmacies have a very long line because you have, 3 pharmacists out of 4 that are on strike, and you just have one pharmacist who's only there, as a civic duty, they're only there because they provide an essential service. The one pharmacist is not really there because they want to be there. And you have a long line. Well, of course, it's going to benefit e-pharmacies, because what do you think is going to happen if you have a long strike on pharmacies? Maybe the customer is the patient is going to tell the doctor, "Hey, doctor, can you please forward my prescription to the Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company?" And then the doctor just inputs this number and provides the prescription to Cost Plus Drug, and then Cost Plus Drug fulfills this prescription, and they can get their insurance involved, and they can get some reimbursement with their insurance. They can do the same thing with Amazon Pharmacy, by the way, and that is if they want to go the traditional route. In the case they don't want to go the traditional route and they don't want to deal with insurance at all, they can just download the HIMSS app, and they can just see a doctor through the HIMSS app and get prescribed a drug through the HIMSS app, all digitally, all, overnight shipping, 2-day shipping, 5-hour shipping, depending on who you go with. And you don't have to deal with these issues, keeping in mind that when you have dysfunction in the traditional pharmacy business, you may have to wait too. or you may have to drive all the way across town to that one pharmacy who has your prescription. So we're moving from a highly inefficient system to a highly efficient system. So, anyways, I hope this strike does not go through for them. But it seems like, given many of the complaints that have been brought up, it seems like there will be a strike. And in my view, all this will do is accelerate the shift to digital pharmacies, to e-pharmacies, to e-doctors. This is what it will do. It will just accelerate that shift. I don't think for them to strike is the smart thing to do. I think employees should work with their employer to try to compete together, and employees should not compete with their employer. They should not be in a confrontation with their employer. This old idea that there is a confrontation between the employee and the employer, in my view, is rooted in industrial work, and it's rooted in the theories of management of the 20s and the 30s. It's not really modern day management. In modern day management, in my view, the pharmacist and the pharmacist tech and the retail techs, they need to meet with a manager, and they need to have a conversation, and they need to come up with a plan together to make the job better. Not strike. I don't believe in that. Anyways, this was a tangent. Okay, so this is not investment advice, of course. This is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. I appreciate your likes. I appreciate your subscribe. Thank you for watching the video, and have a wonderful day.